What made you quit a job on the spot? I had a very stressful job and was expected to answer Slack messages from my boss at any time, or I would be fired. He was in a different time zone, so often I would be woken up at 3 AM being yelled at to do something. One day in the office, he was talking crap about me on Slack and accidentally posted it to a channel I was in. I was killing myself for this guy and he didn't even appreciate it. I packed up and left. Best thing I've ever done. When I was 16, I was a busboy off the books. Made $250 a week working 35 hours a week because they paid per day as opposed to per hour. Manager comes to me and says they're restructuring how the pay scale is and said he wanted me to work less days, same amount of hours but for half the pay. I made him repeat to me his plan and once he confirmed it I said give me money for the week because I'm leaving. +1 for asking for clarification first. Worked at a restaurant as a server. We'd just catered a large wedding reception. The owner's wife was chatting with the wedding party all night and occasionally getting the drinks. At the end of the night she said she's taking her share of the tip since she helped so much. I say fine even though that's illegal in our state. An hour and a half after the party ends the restaurant is still a mess and the owner's wife was just standing around talking while I was supposed to clean up. It was almost midnight and I'd worked my other job earlier that day. I walked out without saying a word. They ended up giving me all of my tips on my last check. Even though that's illegal in our state. For anyone reading, that's illegal in every state. 100% of tips belong to employees in the chain of service, though some states are more restrictive than the new federal standard for pools. They ended up giving me all of my tips on my last check. They dodged a bullet. I got blamed for something that wasn't my fault. Was in an argument with our VP of marketing because I had the audacity to suggest a solution that would have avoided our problem instead of accepting fault for something I didn't do. He told me he doesn't pay me to think, so that was my last day. I had a manager tell me I don't pay you to think, I pay you to work. The owner overheard and told him if this guy, me, has a good idea, you better freaking consider it. Manager goes back to the owner and says if you want him to think then he can think his way into my manager job and stormed away. Got fired shortly thereafter. I did not get his job. LOL. Not on the spot, but I was passed over for a promotion for a role I'd been doing unofficially for 6 months. There was no official position for it when I started doing it. It was one of the manager's responsibilities and they delegated it to me. Honestly, I was happy to do it and I was frequently praised for how efficient and thorough I was doing it. So when an official position opened up to do it full time, I seemed like the obvious choice. A bunch of my coworkers didn't even apply for it because they told me they didn't think there was any point since I was obviously getting the job. They gave it to a guy that worked in a different department and had no experience using the complicated system required for that job. Then the manager asked me to train him in it. Except I wasn't really asked. I was told in a way that sounded like it was asking. We called it being voluntold. I refused. I said to the manager if I'm not good enough to get the job, I'm not good enough to teach someone else how to do it. The manager then accused me throwing a temper tantrum. I quit about a week later. Honestly, that wasn't the only reason. That was just the straw that broke the camel's back. Even the other managers couldn't believe he said that. I worked as a manager in this really awesome cafe bar. My interview was basically drinking a bottle of wine with the owner whilst chatting. Totally relaxed vibe. Local artwork on the walls, which she sold for no commission. Indie music as background noise so you could still have a conversation, etc. One of the guys who worked there was in a band and would often go on tour, and she always made sure his job was waiting for him when he got back. Fast forward 3 years and she became pregnant with twins and decided that she wanted to be a Sam, so she sold the place to a young guy who purchased it as a gift for his fiancée. A nice gift. No, but it soon became apparent that he did this because she couldn't actually hold down a job due to even the most simplest of tasks being entirely beyond her. It took me 4 weeks to teach her how to use the coffee machine. She spent the evening shifts giving freebies to her mates and she totally gave up on using the panini machine. After finally mastering the coffee machine, she announced that they were going to be redecorating, so we would either have to take a week off unpaid or use our holiday time. Everyone was forced to use the holiday time. Came back a week later and we totally didn't recognize the place. It now had white walls with huge TVs blaring out dance music. in a space that only had 12 tables, so loud that we couldn't hear what anyone was saying. We checked the rotas and I had lost 10 hours a week, but the band guy had lost 20 hours. Naturally we asked WTF, and she informed us that she could run the place without us, so cut out hours. We asked if they could delay the new rotas by a month to give us chance to find extra work elsewhere. I was okay as I had a second job that begged me to be full time, but band guy didn't. She said that as we didn't have contract with her, she didn't have to give us any notice. Not gonna lie, I was fuming. So I took my apron off, placed my keys on the counter and said that as we didn't have a contract I didn't have to give any notice that I quit. Then promptly walked out and never went back again. The place closed down within 3 months. Oof, I had flashbacks when you said young guy who purchased it as a gift for his fiancé. The worst. Being hired to sell cars, then in the middle of training I get pulled aside and told I'm being moved to lot attendant. That position paid minimum wage and I didn't even get a chance to be on the sales floor. Left and never went back. I was in my mid-20s at the time and was trying to find a possible career. Didn't have time for that bull's bait and switch. Car dealerships, so sleazy they pull the old bait and switch on the staff, too. I worked as a pizza delivery driver in undergrad. I normally did the evening shift at a small chain pizzeria about 15 minutes off campus. I always made sure that the schedule let me go before close, since I had 8 AM Hindi classes every morning. However, the manager never had enough drivers on shift, so even if my schedule said I was out at 9 PM, I'd rarely get to punch out before 10:30 PM or 11 PM. One night, I had a date and told the manager I'd have to leave on time. He looked me in the eye and said, "We'll see about that." I left and didn't come back. Similarly, another local pizzeria was notorious for its strict management. One of the shift managers was prone to having temper tantrums and could often be heard screaming at line cooks or shrieking at servers. My car broke down on St. Patrick's Day when I was scheduled to work. I had to pay $50 to get it towed home, and I called in to tell the manager what happened. He yelled at me and accused me of making up excuses to go out and drink. I offered to show him the receipt and repair bill, and he just hung up the phone. A day later, he called me and said, "We're cool, but you owe me a shift." I told him that I couldn't take more shifts because I was a full-time student, and he said he didn't care. I went in on my next scheduled shift, picked up my paycheck, and told the nearest manager that I quit. The latter pizzeria was genuinely and generally terrible. The owner got a real kick out of the time he went outside and fired every driver whose delivery sign wasn't lit up by sunset. He also flouted minimum wage laws and didn't adequately compensate tipped drivers who failed to earn their $7.40 per hour. If only I'd been a bit older and thought to report them. I am a physician assistant and took a job at an urgent care. After working there for about a month I noticed some irregularities, such as some medications being expired and sometimes a lack of supplies. I wrote that off as the office manager not being as astute as she should have been and brought it up to the doctor who owned the place. He said he would talk to her and straighten it out. Then one of the medical assistants came to me and said, "You know this has been going on forever, right?" She then said that things would never change and to get used to it because the expired medications had been on the shelf for months and they were told to never throw them out. She then also told me that the autoclave, the machine that sterilizes instruments, was broken and all they did was wash the instruments in soap and water and put them in the autoclave anyway to get them as clean as possible. That was the end of that. I made out a formal complaint to the state medical board and never showed up again. The state actually came in the very next day and raided the place. They shut him down immediately. They found so many things wrong that not only did they keep the place out of business, they suspended his license. He was also prosecuted on federal charges because he was running a scam for truck driver physical exams. Crap, you probably inadvertently saved some lives. Good on you. Not me, but a middle-aged tradesman where I work. I work underground and it isn't for everybody. Terrible environment and whatnot. This particular individual starting working and after a few weeks decided that it wasn't for him. Bad conditions and hostile supervisor. He approached the boss at the morning meeting and told him that he wasn't going underground and that he was quitting. The boss told him that he had to give him 2 weeks notice and without missing a beat the guy replied, For the next 2 weeks you're gonna notice that I'm not here. Turned around, packed his crap and left. Was never heard from again. Man, that's a great line. I'll have to remember that. I worked at Walmart for a short time. I worked as hard as I possibly could to unload their pallets of merchandise. I always thought I was so dang fast. I studied the process and I believed I perfected it. Every single day my manager came up to me and told me I needed to be faster. So I did, and the fast pace made me lose a little focus, causing me to break a finger. I let management know that I might be a little slower due to my injury and they straight up told me we won't tolerate any laziness and wrote me up when I didn't meet their ridiculous standards. So I went home after my shift and never returned, never called, never formally quit. I just never came back. Frick Walmart. We had one of those managers at GameStop. Every conference call with the DM, no matter how well we did, you can do better. Then we were third in the entire company one week. As the store manager was starting the conference call, I said, he'll congratulate you on the performance and immediately follow with, you can do better. It was that. Verbatim. Worked as a cashier in a local shop. One night 2 guys came at me with knives trying to get in the till. I just walked away and said have at it as it wasn't worth the minimum wage to get into it with a couple of guys waving knives at me. After they ran out the store I picked up my mobile and called the police, then called the store manager. The next day, the district manager meets me as I turn up for my shift the very next day. Her first words were it was very unprofessional of me to be on my phone while in work. I laughed at her and told her she could take this as my notice and walked out. I never had a problem with being held up, but the sheer gall of that got me. Also very unprofessional to get stabbed on the job. Lucky you got out of that place. I worked for T-Mobile store, authorized reseller, not an actual dealer. 1 week, I had an amazing week. Sold 55 phones. Brand new activations on a business account with 55 high-end phones at that time. When I got my next check, they said my paperwork was not in order and thus they couldn't pay me. As a side note, they always told us to make copies of all paperwork in case this happened so you can show it to the manager and get it resolved within a day. I went over my backup paperwork with my boss. He said everything looked to be in order and he would have the office cut me a check. I went to the office, and they told me it was still not in order. I immediately gave them my store key and quit on the spot. I did go through collections and they did settle before I took them to court. The company did go out of business after a few years because they tried that with many other employees and eventually led to an investigation by the government, according to an old co-worker I bumped into years later. Whilst closing the cafe, a large man came up to the thankfully locked front door and stared me down. He refused to leave and didn't say a word, just stared at me. It was the only way to exit the shop at that hour, so I called my boss telling her I'm about to call the cops. Or do you know who the frick this guy is? She just told me it's something I'm going to have to deal with as the coffee shop is next to a train station, so there are a lot of vagrants in the area. Called the police who escorted me to my car. The guy was screaming into the garbage when I drove away. Nope, the frick right out of there real fast. Walked into the interview. Everything went well. Accepted the job offer. Went to the front desk to do the paperwork and noticed that the contract had a different pay amount, and that I would be interning for the first month for $100 a week. I asked first about the amount difference. Was told no, this the standard contract. It just hasn't been updated for your specific offer. I told them they'd need to edit and initial the changes before I would sign. Oh, that's not how things work here. I thanked them for their time and left without signing anything. They called me back on the day I was supposed to have started asking where I was. I told them because didn't sign the contract. I was never an employee. Haru boy, that was a fun call. I worked at McDonald's when I was 16. We used to get a free McDouble hot and spicy with a small fries and drink for our lunch break. One day when I went on break, the franchise owner was there, and when he noticed I asked for cheese on the hot and spicy, he attempted to make me pay for the whole meal because cheese wasn't free. I thought he was joking, so I laughed and started walking towards the break room until he yelled at me not to walk away from him in front of customers and my co-workers. I couldn't believe it. This grown but successful businessman was hounding a 16-year-old for a slice of cheese. Told him I wasn't gonna pay, put the food down and walked out. They tried calling me to come to work that weekend. I told them no thanks and never went back. That's crazy. Cheap butt guys. I worked at McDonald's when I was 18. And we could eat anything we wanted. I'd make quesadillas in the kitchen. And the managers would ask for some too, lol. I worked for an attorney. I was 7 months pregnant. I was supposed to be a secretary, but instead I was constantly being sent out as a process server. In July, at the end of my 3 months, August, I was supposed to get a raise and she said that she couldn't give me a raise. The day she said that, I left at lunch and never went back. She was an awful person, and the guy I replaced told me that he felt sorry for me on my first day as he was leaving. I should have left that day. Once as a teenager at a new job, I got my hand smacked by the owner the first day because I was writing with my left hand. Walked out. Had a job about 10 years ago doing tech support for an ISP for a week. The pay was minimum wage and bonuses you earned for selling people stuff. And by stuff I mean terrible, overpriced services that you can get online for free. I was still in the phase of training where I had a supervisor listening in on my calls, and after a call, he told me I should have paused to try and sell him some crappy antivirus service before I fixed his problem. Handed in my headset right there. Felt so skeevy when people call you for help and you have to turn into a telemarketer. Worked for a privately owned bakery for exactly 1 week. The owner's son comes in, walks past the counter and into the bathroom. He comes out a few minutes later without acknowledging me or my co-worker, gets into his car and drives away. We both looked at each other, then opened the door only to find this guy literally crap all over the toilet seat and the toilet paper holder. I called the owner, told her what happened, and she said to deal with it. So I asked my co-worker if she wanted to clean it up because I wasn't going to. She declined and I told her I was walking out. She did as well. We locked up the store and told the owner we quit but would reconsider staying if her son came back to clean up his own mess. She yelled and berated us for 20 seconds before I said goodbye and hung up. Jesus Christ. That family must have some crazy mental issues. Began working at a Persian restaurant in the kitchen. I overcooked a steak slightly. The owner came back, threw a plate at us, then a hot meat skewer before storming off to his office. I dropped my apron, grabbed my bag and told him I was leaving. His response was, "Okay, at the end of the night you can go." My response was clearly, "You don't understand. I'm leaving right now. Here's my parking pass. I'll expect my check in the mail." I got mugged on a delivery for Domino's and came back to the shop crying and panicked. Had my phone, wallet, and pizza taken. Told my manager what happened. Anon. "Are you hurt?" "No, but I lost my phone and wallet. I need to call the police." "No time for that. Here's your next delivery." It was like 2 blocks from where I was just mugged. I just went home. The police never really did much to get my phone and wallet back. Not like they could. I had worked for a cleaning company and I had a total disaster of a person named Tina as my manager for about 4 months. Tina would work the night shift with a crew and basically did nothing. She would leave the majority of the work for me to do during the day when it was a lot harder to do as I had my own list of duties as well as whatever she left for me from her own list. I was teetering on the edge of quitting, but I hadn't found a replacement when one day I got a call from head office that Tina had quit, and for about a month the job was exceptionally better and I effectively was my own boss. Things were going remarkably smooth for about a month when I got a text message from Tina asking me to do a bunch of extra stuff. I called the owner and they told me that Tina had approached them about coming back and that they were rehiring her in her former position, and I literally just packed up and walked out about an hour into my shift. I had zero intention of working another minute for that woman and held to it. For a second, it was almost a happy ending. And then it wasn't. XC, hope you're doing better now though. I get a job at a restaurant. First day I show up and the heat is broken in the dead of winter. It was like 35 degrees. I ask the cooks if it's always like this, and they say yes. I walked immediately. I was getting married. I had a temp job and told them on my first day that I needed a weekend off in a couple of months for my wedding. I reminded them every couple of weeks, had it on the calendar, and even reminded them that Monday. That weekend came, and I was on the schedule. I told my boss that I needed it off for my wedding, and she said, "You're just a kid. Can't you move it?" We really need the parts. Admittedly, I was 21 marrying my 19-year-old girlfriend, but yet, I laughed at her and left. We were scheduled Saturday and Sunday, 2 attendance points and you're fired. So I assumed that I'd be job hunting on Monday after my wedding. I went to another temp agency on Monday and had a job lined up for Monday evening. On Tuesday, the temp job called and asked if I was coming back. I told that person, the temp agency lady, what they'd done to me. She was upset that they'd done that. Tried to get me to go back, but I liked the new job and stayed there. I was at a company for about a year and a half as an assistant project manager. In that year and a half, I had 3 different bosses, the newest one being a heavy micromanager. I was getting paid about 20% below the standard salary for the position, overworked without any additional compensation, and the overall culture of the company was just flawed. My boss started nitpicking my work at the end of the day. I told her I had plenty of time to get it done before the end of the day, but she kept pushing and escalating. She was borderline screaming and I just cut her off and said I'm not doing this crap anymore. I quit. She yelled back, well, I need IT and writing, and I said back with the straightest face, I don't have to do crap in writing. I quietly packed all my stuff up, said good luck to my co-workers, and left. A year later, after working a couple of other jobs, I accepted a project manager position with a competing company and make almost twice as much as I was making at the previous. And I get to post on Reddit while at work without getting yelled at. After working at a company for 5 years with a set schedule having weekends off, we got a new supervisor that told me no one gets set schedules here and told me I'd have no weekend day and they would be split. I was already having a bad day. My transfer request was denied, and supervisors were on my butt like they owned it. Nearing my lunch break, I was stopped by a customer asking about a price check. Me, not able to do a price check, said please take it up to the front. They can help you there. Wasn't good enough. The customer proceeds to berate me, almost making me cry. Finally she says, how about you just go kill yourself? Like what? Knowing that management wouldn't do anything, I just left. Frick that. Being abused for minimum wage? Not worth it. I don't understand customers that blame the random frontline workers for stuff that is clearly out of their control. The gas station attendant did not raise prices. The person working returns at Target did not break your doohickey. The customer support person you called did not mess up your Netflix subscription. I was working for a financial company in Sokol for about a month at the time. It was a little stuffy, but otherwise okay, until my manager came over, asked why I took so long in the bathroom. Literally, 5 minutes to take a dump. He mentioned something about having to count it as a break and me being more careful in the future or something. I laughed, handed him my badge and left. Asked for a raise and was told okay. Next morning, Friday, I was told by the same person who agreed with the raise that I should put a few more years in and then we'll talk again. Locked my toolbox at the end of the day and called a tow truck to pick it up. Shop manager was shocked that next Monday to find an empty spot where my tools were and couldn't understand why I left. You are braver than me. I was told I'd get a raise and stuck around waiting for it for 6 months before finally jumping ship. This was after 4 years of my career with no change in pay whatsoever and consistent, good quality work. Now I advocate for myself. LOL. I had an inside hint from HR that there was about to be mass layoffs and my name was on the list. I scheduled my week-long vacation and returning the day before layoffs were presumed to have happened. My boss reamed me out for daring to take a vacation. She said I would never advance in the company if I chose such a formative time in a project to take a vacation. She told me I would never be an executive producer if I went on a vacation before project launch, even though I wouldn't be able to touch it for the week I was away anyways, and that I would always be known in the television industry as lazy. I chilled, took my vacation, and returned. She was mad and said that she was upset with me for having left and made her take care of my project for me. Chewed me out in front of the entire company in the conference room. I chilled and was like, aren't you laying off a bunch of us tomorrow? I'm just waiting for you to fire me so I can collect unemployment. Entire room literally starts panicking and management tries to understand how the frick I knew about layoffs. It was my one true Regina George causing chaos moment in my life. My grandfather, who I considered like a father, passed away after a long stay in hospital. We were closer than he was with his own kids, and our bond was quite special. I spoke to my manager about getting the day of his funeral off, since I was organizing part of the arrangements, and having a day or two of bereavement leave, and he agreed. The day of the funeral finally comes and the staff start calling me, leaving me messages asking why I am not at my shift, and telling me, while I'm in a suit hosting family members at the funeral home, that I have to find someone to replace me or face repercussions. Needless to say, I told them to figure it out, and never looked back. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.